Welcome to another episode of the Bread and Bars podcast. My name is Sean, your illustrious host, and we're here again for another episode. And I realized that I've done 3 episodes so far, and I haven't really done an episode where you guys get to know me, right? You just see this guy coming on here doing a podcast. Who are you? What are you about? So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and I also have a few questions here that I think would be a good idea, a good way to really understand who I am, right? There's a lot of facets to my personality, right? I'm going to tell you that. I mentioned to you in the first episode that I'm going to be as authentic as I possibly can be. And in that, you have to realize that there's a lot of layers to my personality, right? There's a deep side, there's a spiritual side, there's a goofy side. There's a lot of different sides, and over the time you'll see all of them. Like, I can't express everything to you today, but over time you'll see some of them. And even in how I answer some of these questions, you might say, hey, I'm just like that too, right? So, you know what? I just have the idea that maybe we should do I'm gonna do a pick your poison episode where we play the game where you pick your poison. So two bad situations to see how how you would respond to that. So we'll do an episode like that. But right now, so let's start with, my name is Sean. I am originally from New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey. So shout out to all my friends from Newark that's watching, or friends from East Orange that's watching. I moved to Florida at a very young age. I was 14, I think I was 13 or 14. I was 14 when I moved to Florida. I started a life here, right? Had kids, got married, in no particular order, right? Let's see. I am a I was introduced to the church life early. Well, I'll say 12. I was introduced into church when I was back in New Jersey, by my best friend's mother. One of my best friend's mother. She she introduced me to the book called The Rapture, right? And when she told me how that would play out, it scared me into wanting to go to church. So I went to church with her. And when I went there, my only interest was the girls that were there, right? I'm looking around like all these old people. Then I see girls around my age. I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on with that? And it didn't make it any better that the pastor's grandson was my best friend, and his cousin. They were worse off than me, because I was just looking at girls like, oh, I wonder what that what it would be like to be with her. They were a little bit further along than I was, right? Um, so yeah, that was like the beginning of it, and then I stopped going to church after a while. Um, I stopped going to that church, and then we moved to Florida. When we moved to Florida, I had another friend whose grandmother was deep in the church, right? I think it was like a Pentecostal or Baptist church, one of those. So she was like, oh, you guys got to come to church with me. I was like, oh, God, we got to do this again. But it wasn't like I was really against church. It was like I didn't have that connection quite yet, right? So I went, and the same thing. I went looking for the girls. I was like, hey, I was older now, right? So I'm like looking for girls here and there, whatever. And it really didn't really have much of an impact on me. I knew it was a place that it's something I wanted to be a part of, right? Because even when I was younger, I remember early, before anybody introduced me to any real church, like I would go to Catholic church on Easter and Christmas, I think, right? Because that's where my grandmother and my mother was. They were Catholic. I would go, and I remember one day when I was about 10 years old, I remember looking up at the sky, and I was like, God, if I can have just a small portion of your power, um, that'll be cool, right? But I was a little bad kid. Like, I remember, it's funny, I remember saying that, and then shortly after that, I remember lighting a newspaper on fire. I lit a newspaper on fire, and it got so out of hand that somebody called the fire department, and they trying to figure out who started the fire. It was me, right? But I didn't tell anybody. Nobody knew about it. So I was a little mischievous, little something. So anyway, I come to Florida. and I started going to church with my friend's grandmother. And I stopped that after a while too. Like once I turned 18 or 17, I think it was, I stopped going. Like I don't have to go anymore. And listen, I was living my life, right? Once again, I knew there was something. I always had a reverence for God, so to speak, or what I thought God was. And I will always hear people say stuff like you'll hear people talk about, oh, as black man, you know, we gods, and I've heard some things about Christ consciousness, and it never made any sense to me back then. So then the biggest part is I get introduced to church again through my kid's mother. And I started going, and I this time I took a little something for myself, right? I wasn't just going for the women because I had a woman, I guess, at the time. Um, but I got something from it, right? Something that the pastor was preaching kind of made sense to me. And it's more so I wanted to do it because I wanted to be a better father to my children. Because by this time I had kids. I wanted to be a better father to my children, and I knew that the way I was living wasn't going to do it, right? They were just going to repeat the same things that I was doing, which I wasn't proud of at the time, right? Being honest. So, um, yeah, so I got into it, and then we broke up, but I stayed in the church. Um, I got more for myself, right? And I started to grow. I started to grow. I started to grow spiritually, getting more of an understanding of the Bible and the spiritual realm and things like that. And then again, it became more of me wanting to be a better person for myself than for my kids or for my wife or whoever. Um, then I think the biggest change was church hurt, right? So some things happened at the church where we weren't aligned anymore, and I ended up having to leave the church over some crazy things, right? So then I realized that what I believe wasn't just tied to the four walls of the church. There had to be so much more than just doing things at the church, paying your tithes and offering at a certain time. I knew there had to be so much more than what I was told or what I was taught. Um, and I wanted to know what that was, right? I knew there was a truth out there that was irrefutable, right? Because I remember going out to evangelize, as they call it, going out to witness and telling people about Jesus and salvation and all this other stuff. And I remember being so scared because what if they asked me a question that I don't know the answer to? Because I thought I needed the answers for everything, right? What if they asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to? I need to have the irrefutable truth that if they ask me a question, I will know the answers, right? A lot of eyes in there. But I could never find it. There was this peace that I searched for, a peace through truth, right? Let's call it that. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it in the church. Um, when I left the church, I wasn't no longer spoon fed. Um, I wasn't spoon fed information. At this point, I had to have. It was all based on my relationship and understanding with God's divinity, right? His true divinity, his true sovereignty, and my connection or my responsibility or my connection with him, right? Once I started to understand that, some things changed. My eyes opened up in a way that it never has before. If you watched my previous episode, I talked about thinking outside of the box. And I started to step more into thinking out of the box and then than I ever have in my life. Right. And I realized what happened was I was invited to a speaking engagement, right? And during that speaking engagement, I was there with a few friends that I met in the church, right? So very, very respectful men, right, in the church. And as they were speaking, and I had to speak after them, I'm like, okay, this this is going to go a whole different way than I'm expected it to, right, or the way it would in the past, right? and again, I'm always going to respect them for their work that they put in and things like that. I'm not taking away anything from them. But what happened was my journey shifted. My journey as far as what I understand as God is different, right? I was introduced to the concept of non-duality, right? Where there's no separateness in God between me and God, right? So then that whole thing of Christ consciousness came back in, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm thinking about all the scriptures that I know now where Jesus talked about being one with God and how the kingdom of God is within us, right? And how so a lot of things started to come into play, and then I've learned about I got an understanding of the Kabbalah, right, which is some would call it Jewish mysticism, but the Kabbalah basically means received information or received truth, and this was like I said, it was Jewish mysticism, but what it was more so of a deeper understanding of the Torah, right? Which is the first five books of the Bible, was what the Jews really look to as their doctrine, right? So this gave me a whole new concept of my relationship with God and spirituality, and even sin as a whole. Like, what is it? What does it mean? How does God look at sin versus how traditional church looks at sin? And it taught me that when we fall short, right, or when we um, let's call it slip up, all it means is that we're out of alignment with who God is, right? And it doesn't require punishment, but more so an adjustment to put us back in alignment. Um, and the further off alignment we are, the further away we become from God. But in all truth, we're all still connected as one. So we'll do another episode about that a later time, because that's something that I'm very passionate about. Um, but between that and quantum physics, I've started to study how science and spirituality aligns with one another. And I've I've always wanted to do a podcast, right? From early years, I have videos that I recorded with my daughter because she used to joke about me. And I always used to say stuff like, "In today's society," right? And that was my modus operandi. That's kind of how I spoke. That's kind of how I came across things, and yeah. So I've always wanted to do a podcast, but then as I started to learn more, I'm like, you know what? I can't keep this to myself. I have to share this, right? Because oftentimes, like I was saying in my previous episode, right? Oftentimes, if I say these things to people, to certain people in my circle, they'll look at me like I'm crazy. Like, oh, you can't do that. You can't go, basically, you can't go against tradition. You have to do what you've been traditionally taught to do, right? But yeah, I couldn't do that. So here we are. All right, I got a couple of questions that I'm gonna ask to kind of help get to know me. I mean, that's kind of me personally. That's kind of like where my journey started and kind of is now. So I'm gonna ask some of these questions just to kind of have some fun, right? I mean, they're not all fun questions, but they're entertaining, right? It says, "What belief you once held strongly, but later realized wasn't true?" By the way, if you like any of these questions, you can write the question and answer them in the comments, right? That'll be cool. You write the question, you answer it, one or two it, however many you want. Share it with somebody, or maybe you can ask this question to a group of your friends, right? What belief you once held strongly, but later realized wasn't true? And I think I said that, but um, oh, a big one is that I am not enough. That is something that I believe for a very long time, because I would always tell myself the stories of when I was younger and how nobody would listen to me, and I always felt like what I had to say didn't matter, right? But then I realized that my value isn't based on how other people feel about me or what they think about me. So what I have to say and what I think does matter. So that was a big one for me. If your life was a book, what would the current chapter be called? Ooh, that's a good one. If my life was a book, what would the current chapter be called? It would be chapter 13. Oh, we getting serious now. I like that. Yeah, oh, we getting serious now. Because I feel like things are starting to, I feel like I'm starting to turn a corner in life now. So yeah. Um, what's a childhood moment that shaped who you are today? A childhood moment that shapes who I am today. I'm gonna say it was the. Ooh, I'm gonna say it was around the time when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I think I was probably my most authentic self then because I actually had a business at that age. If any one of my family members were watching me, or any people I knew around the time was watching now, they know. Um, I was an entrepreneur, right? This is around the time, like I told you earlier, when I looked up in the sky and said, hey, God, if I could just have a small portion, I think I said like 1% of your power or something like that. Or I said this much power, right? I looked up at the sky and said, if I could have this much of your power, it would be great. Um, but yeah, I was still, I had a way of making money at a young age. And what happened was, the reason why I say that was a part that was truly me, because the only reason why I didn't pursue that path is because I was surrounded around people that told me I had to get a job. I had to get a regular 9 to 5. But if I had somebody around me and say, "Oh, you got to continue that entrepreneur spirit," who knows where I would be, right? So, I think that was the most time when I recognized who I was. But then at the same time, I had other people trying to steer me otherwise, steer me in other directions. So yeah, I think that shapes who I am today. What's one thing about yourself that even people close to you might not know? I'm pretty transparent. Pretty much an open book. Um, I would say something that even people close to me don't know. Maybe I don't want them to know. Maybe that's why they don't know. Um, I am. I love them. I'll leave it at that. I think some people close to me don't realize that I love them when I do. Just because I don't talk to you don't mean I don't love you. Just leave it at that. If you could send a message to yourself 10 years ago, what would it say? Ooh, I don't know. Okay, wait. If you could send a message, so one message to yourself 10 years ago, what would it say? I would say learn the financial market. If I could have started that 10 years ago, because I also day trade. So if I would have told myself that 10 years ago, I would be in a really good place now. Oh yeah, I would be in a really good place now. Um, ooh, yeah, I'm leaving it at that. Okay, so if you had to pick one conspiracy theory to be 100% true, which one would you choose? Ooh, that's a good one. If you could choose a conspiracy theory to be 100% true, what would you choose? None of the conspiracy theories I know of, are really good ones. So I would say, okay, I got one. So there's this thing that says that there's a bank account that we have in our names, that we have like millions of dollars in, and throughout our lives, our jobs aren't paying us, but we're being paid out of this large bank account. Our social security number is um, our social security number is our account number, and our birth date is our routing number, or something like that. And if we had access to it, we can have access to the money. So that's something I've heard. I don't know how true it is, but if that's something that I would like to have to be true. What's the weirdest compliment you've ever received? Um, the weirdest compliment I've ever received, honestly, is that I look like I wear braces or I've worn braces. Um, I don't know why. I think, yeah, I think that's the weirdest compliment I've ever gotten. Like I've always gotten compliments about my voice, um, but I think that's probably the weirdest one because only one person has ever said that to me. Um, so yeah, I think that was the weirdest one. What was the weirdest compliment you got? That's the one. Write that down in the comments. What's the weirdest compliment you've ever gotten? I want to know that. I'm gonna read these. So write that one down. Let's see what we got here. If you had a theme song, what would it be and why? Did I read that right? If your life had a theme song, what would it be and why? I would say I would say Fresh Prince of Bel Air because I like that theme song and it's a rap and it's a classic. I love that. So that would like that would be. I mean, it's not that my life is like that, but something like that. Like it would be a rap song in the beginning of the episode, beginning of every episode. Like I would wake up. I do sometimes. I wake up to music as my alarm because I like to have a theme for the day or something to get me going. I like listening to music early in the morning, first thing in the morning. If you could swap lives with any fictional character for a week, who would it be, and what's the first thing you would do? I wouldn't swap lives with anybody. Realistically, I don't. I don't ever want to swap lives with anybody. I like my life, but we're talking about fictional, right? We're gonna have some fun. We're talking about fictional. Easy, Superman, all day, Superman. What's the first thing I would do? I would. I would take a flat earther and fly them around the world. I would take somebody who believes that the earth is flat and I will fly them around the world. Like, see, it's a globe. All right, let's see. What's the next one? Okay, a couple more here. We got a couple more minutes. Um, what's one lesson you had to learn the hard way? Um, there's so many. What's a lesson you had to learn the hard way? I would say it is love yourself. Love yourself. I had to learn that the hard way through heartbreak and disappointment and rejection and all the stuff that I wish I didn't have to go through. But if I loved myself, I wouldn't. But now I know better. Um, if you had to explain your purpose in one sentence, what would it be? I could be better than one sentence. I could give you one word. I think my purpose is a guide. My purpose is to use my insight, my experience to help guide others to be their best version, the best version of themselves, the most enlightened version of themselves. I say guide not because I'm leading them in that place. Oh, wait, one sentence. Okay, wait. Scratch all of that. My purpose is to be a guide to those who feel like they're ready to start a journey to the best version of themselves or the more enlightened version of themselves. One sentence, right? Okay. Last one. What's the question you wish more people would ask you? How are you doing? How are you doing? Like for real, how are you doing? Not just hey, how you doing? And walking away. Like really, how are you doing? What's up? How are you? That's it. So anyway, this was fun, right? Getting to know you session with me, your host Sean, with the Bread and Bars podcast. I'm excited. Once again, thank you guys for watching the last 3 episodes. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe um, to this podcast. Comment, share it wherever you share cool things. Share it with somebody you think would enjoy this. Whether it be this episode or the other episodes that are informative, Once again, I thank you guys for sticking with me. I know we were out for a while, but we're back right now. This is episode 4, I think it is. So yeah, we're growing, and we're gonna keep on growing. So thank you guys for watching. Have a great day.